Hi, it's Greg Hurrell here with another Vim screencast, and I'm going to share some pointless knowledge with you tonight, but it might be interesting. So the idea is to set up a custom protocol handler, which would enable you to open files in Vim in the terminal by doing things like clicking on links, just like you would click on a link to a web page to have it open in a browser. So let's do a quick demo of what I'm talking about here. So say I have a website link. We all know that when we click on this, it's going to open in my default browser. So there we go. That's my website. And it opened in Chrome because my operating system knows that Chrome is the handler for this kind of URL. So what would it be like if we could have like a Vim protocol handler? So let me put in a path here for a file. If I click on this, have it open in Vim in the terminal. Now that might seem like a pretty pointless thing to do, and it probably is, because after all I was already in the terminal and I already was in Vim and I could have just opened the file. But I haven't let that kind of thing stop me in the past, and I'm not going to let it stop me now. So let me show you how this works. So first of all, I want to give a bit of a rationale for why I even got to this place. It all started with this command called mvim. The idea of this command is to open the current file in MacVim. So when I hit enter there, you'll see MacVim opened. There it is. And it opened the same file for me. Now the reason I did this was because I was having trouble with some files that contained emoji when I was editing them in the terminal Vim, because the character widths would confuse the system. And so the only really way to edit those files was to open them in MacVim, and then when I was done, I would just quit the app and I'd be back where I started. Now, I've since solved my problems with emoji. So you could learn more about that in episode 83 if you want. But having solved the problems with emoji, that meant that I didn't really need to use the mvim command anymore. And I thought, well, why don't I make a Vim command that does the same? Just say I want to pop out of my current context and go to an instance of Vim somewhere. I should be able to hit enter and, well, here it is. It opened a new terminal window with Vim with the file that I was previously editing. Now, under the covers, this is implemented using the protocol handler that I just showed you. I still don't know whether this is a very useful thing to do, or even if there are better ways to do it, but this is a way to do it. And so I'm going to show you how that works. So let's start by looking at the commands. So as I said, we've got mvim and we've got vim, and you can see that both of those just call a couple of different auto-loaded functions. So let's look at those auto-loaded functions. There it is. So you can see them here. Let's look at mvim first. Basically, it just expands the path of the current file, and then it calls this sopen function with MacVim and the file name. So what does sopen do? First of all, it checks to make sure that we have an open executable, which we do on macOS, and then it invokes it. Basically, it's going to tell the OS, use this application to open the following file, and it does, as we've seen. So if we compare that to what where is it here? The Vim one. The Vim function here, very similar, expands the path to the current file, makes it an absolute path, escapes it, and then shells out to call the open executable again. But this time, instead of telling it what application to use, it just gives it a URL. So in order for this to work, we have to tell the OS that Vim URLs are to be handled by a particular application. So let me show you how I did that. There's a tool called Duty that I will link to in the notes that come with this, that you can use to tell the application you can use to tell the OS which application should handle a particular URL scheme. So if we go through my history, we'll eventually find it. There it is. This is where we're telling it that iTerm2 should handle Vim protocol URLs. The other piece, which I can't remember off the top of my head, so I'm going to have to look it up. We also have to do some configuration of iTerm itself. So I put that here in the README. Here it is. Basically, we have to set a preference setting to iTerm, telling it that the Vim URL scheme should be handled by a particular profile. So where did this UUID come from? Well, it came from a dynamic profile. Now, if you want to learn more about dynamic profiles, I also have a screencast for that, number 66. Now this describes how I use dynamic profiles to do things like change the font size when I plug in a Retina or a non-Retina display. But I'll show you what a dynamic profile looks like. In this case, it's Vim. Let's look for dynamic Vim. This is what a simple dynamic profile looks like. As you can see, they're just JSON files. These are basically preference files for iTerm that are pretty handy because they can inherit from one another and you can override settings. And the reason why they're called dynamic profiles is that whenever you change them on the file system, iTerm will immediately pick it up. But in this case, we're using the dynamic profile because we need this thing that has a UUID so that we can identify which profile should be used. And then we need a command to say what should happen when a particular profile is in use. So when I click on one of those Vim protocol links, the OS knows that iTerm should handle it. And iTerm knows that this profile should be used to handle it. And you can see what it's doing here is basically just firing up Zeesh, and inside Zeesh, NeoVim, and then passing this magical variable here, which is basically the rest of the URL once the schema has been skipped off. So that's why, if I got through my history here, let's find one. Yeah, here's one. Basically, it'll strip off the vim : / and just use the rest of this path here. So when I hit enter here, we can probably predict the result. It's going to open a new terminal window with Vim in it and that file. So there we go. So let me just, I don't think there's anything else to show you inside Vim at this point because we've seen how the command works. I guess one last thing that I would mention before I go is that there are other ways to open stuff in Vim in the terminal. One of them I talked about in episode 45 was this open in terminal Vim trick, which very briefly consists of basically an app that contains a little script in it. And when you drop files on it, it does the same thing. It opens a terminal window and puts the current file in a Vim buffer. And you can also do stuff like do it from the open with menu. I don't know what's wrong with my Finder at the moment, but normally you would be able to, there we go, use the open in terminal Vim app to do that. And in fact, you could make it the default if you wanted. That'll do the same thing, open a file in Vim for you. So now we've got two kind of strange ways to open things from outside the terminal, inside the terminal. In practice, I almost never use any of these techniques because I'm usually in a TMAC session and that's where I spend my entire day. But I still think it's interesting that this kind of thing is possible, and so that's why I'm sharing it. I hope it was interesting, even if it wasn't useful. And if you want to hear more content from me, please subscribe because I have plenty more Vim stuff to talk about in the future. Thanks a lot. See you later.